I thought I'd talk a bit about violence because it's quite prevalent in society at the moment, and I thought I'd start by telling you the story of when I worked in a nightclub in Coventry. It was Christmas, well, it was just after Christmas. All the clubs were closed, all the pubs were closed, and our manager decided that he was going to open up the club. It was a really great place that I used to work in called Buster's Nightclub, and he said he's going to open the club after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year, on this specific day because nobody else was open, and he said this would allow him to clean up. As he said, we were the only club open in the whole town, and when people asked me about Coventry, they said, "Can you describe Coventry? What do you know? How could you describe Coventry in those times?" This is a story I often tell to describe what Coventry was like in those days. So we opened the club up. We're going to clean up. There's no one else open. There's just us. So anybody that wants a drink has got to come to us. We end up with two people in the club, two strangers. They both come in at separate times. They don't know each other. They're both stood by the bar. So this big club has got two people in, and I'm working the door. Suddenly the alarm goes off, which indicates that somebody's fighting, and I'm there thinking, who could be fighting? There's only two people in the club. So I run in, and these two guys are fighting. These two guys are fighting by the bar. And I said to the barmaid, "What's happened?" She said, "They just kicked off." So I managed to separate them, and I dragged them out one by one, get them out of the club and throw them outside. And I said to them, what are you fighting for? And one said, "He looked at me." And I said, "Well, who else is he going to look at? You're the only other person in the club." These you know, that old saying, you could start a fight in an empty room. These two people started a fight in an empty club because one looked at the other. And when the manager came in, he says, "Where's my customers?" I said, "I threw them out." He said, "What do you mean you threw them out?" I said, "Well, I threw them out. Why? They were fighting." "Fighting with who?" I said, "They were fighting with each other." He said, "What were they fighting for?" I said, "Because one of them looked at the other." And he says, "Well, who the fuck else are they going to look at?" I said, "Oh no, you're telling me. I have no idea." What I love about this story is that it talks about what violence really is, which is, you know, we think it's an environmental thing. We think it's, you know, it's because it's a rough city. We think it's because people are uneducated or whatever. But actually, you know, but violence is about what's in us. It's about what's in there. When I was very insecure and I was working nightclub doors, and people thought I was very tough, but I was actually a very insecure guy, and that's why I was in so many fights. But I said to my wife one day, "Fucking hell, everywhere I go there's violence. Everywhere I go there's trouble. This is a really violent city. Isn't this a violent world?" And my wife said, "There's a common denominator in what you say, Geoff." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Everywhere you go. The violence is everywhere you go. The violence is in you." And I thought, yeah, that's very true. If I go to a christening, I end up in a fight with somebody and it seems legitimate. Somebody's kicked off, they call me to sort it out because I'm the doorman. I sort it out. I'm out in the car, someone cuts me up, I end up fighting. I go to a wedding, look across the aisle and I see somebody across the aisle that I've had a fight with before, and I know it's going to kick off later. I'm in the Chinese takeaway, I bump into somebody that doesn't like the look of the ring I'm wearing. I'm wearing a nice sovereign ring. He doesn't like the look of the ring. I'm in a fight. I go to the takeaway after the nightclub, end up knocking 3 or 4 people out. Everywhere I went there was violence. Everything around me was violent. My house was violent. Every room of my house had a weapon in. Every room, a knife, a club, a bat, a bar, under my bed. For years and years I slept with a set of nunchuckers. I was really good with nunchuckers. I had a baseball bat in my car, and I always kept a ball with it. I always kept a baseball with it, so that if the police pulled me and said, "What's the bat for?" I said, "Well, just knock the ball around when I've got 5 minutes because there's a ball with it." Although my friend suggested that if a policeman stopped me and said, "What's the bat for?" I should say it's for cheeky coppers. That probably wouldn't go down very well. Any more than the time when a policeman pulled me up and said, "Your back light's not working," and I said, "My back light? Where's my fucking caravan?" So the violence is in us, the aggression is in us. We think we can't trust anybody, but that's because the jealousy and the insecurity is in us, or the distrust is in us. We think the world is corrupt, that's because there's corruption in us. That we think the world is fundamental, but that's because there's fundamentalism in us. It's in us. I was walking recently on one of the walks I did. On all the way round, one of the guys was saying to me, he's a very lovely guy and very intelligent guy, but he just kept saying to me, "How do I deal with this domestic problem I've got? How do I deal with this violence I've got around by my house? How do I deal with this threat that I've got? How do I deal with the fact that this guy insulted my father and I want to kill him? How do I deal with the fact that the people where I work look down on me?" And I said to him, "Well, but you know, how can I get my revenge on them? How can I hurt them? How can I damage them? What technique can I use?" And I said, "Well, you've got to look at the fact that wherever you go, you sense violence, or you see violence, or you are around violence. It's in you." I said, "So it's not really a matter of me teaching you a physical technique that will solve all those situations. The violence and these insecurities in you." And every time I got 5 yards, he would say, "So what of this situation? What about that situation? And what about the fence? And what about the preemptive strike?" And I said, "Well, they're all good techniques." But I said, but the point is that, you know, there are not enough techniques, because wherever you go, there's going to be more and more violence, because the violence is in you. And he asked and he asked and he asked. In the end, I said to him 10 times, "The violence is in you. It's in you. It's in you. It's in you. The violence is in you. It is in you. The violence is in fucking you. It's in you. It's in you. It's in you." That's what we've got to look at. That's what I look at. I do not have to worry about my wife. I do not have to worry about my son. I do not have to worry about my friends. I don't have to worry about my parents. I don't have to worry about society. I don't have to worry about you know, fundamentalism in the world, or greedy bankers, or corrupt politicians. I don't have to worry about that. I just have to make sure that it's not in me. And when I get that pilot light of aggression and I feel aggressive about something, that's not because it's violent out there, it's because it's corresponding with something that's in me. So I need to deal with that in me. Otherwise, wherever I go, I will find violence. There's that great story about the guy walking, a guy sat on the side of a road, a guy walks up to him and says, "What's the next city like?" And the guy on the side of the road said to him, "What was the last city like?" And he said, "Well, the last city was full of violence, full of aggression, full of negative people, full of greedy people." And the guy on the side of the road said, "The next city is just the same. It's exactly the same." Another guy comes along half an hour later and he says to the guy on the side of the road, "What's the next city like?" And the guy on the side of the road said, "What was the last city like?" And he said, "It was a wonderful place, actually, very nice. The people were very generous, very beautiful." He said, "I've never actually found so much generosity." He said, "The next city is just the same. It's just the same. It's just as beautiful." It's like, I think it was Rudyard Kipling or one of the great poets, said to his friend, "How was your visit to Paris?" He said, "Paris was shit." He said, "Paris was full of shit." He said, "The people were terrible." He said, "They were rude. They were ignorant." He said, "It was a terrible place." He said, he said, and Rudyard Kipling said to him, "You've mistaken the question. I wasn't asking you about you. I was asking you about Paris." It's in us. It's in us. It is in us. So when I had it in me, that insecurity, because implicitly I was told at the age of 10, at the age of 12, that the world could not be trusted. I was told it by somebody that I idolised and he abused me. So implicitly he's put that on the hard drive. The world cannot be trusted, not even people that you love, especially people that you love. So that's on the hard drive. So I go out with that very powerful belief and that very powerful imagination, and I create this very violent, unstable world. Everywhere I go there's violence. Every room of my house there is a weapon. I create nightclubs, I create pubs, I create a myriad martial arts clubs and fighting clubs. I'm training with the best people in the world. I've become this killer I've become this master of physical technique. I can damage people, I can knock people out, I can kill people, I know how to physically kill people. These hands work in fucking 80 languages. And that's what I build all that armor, all of these tattoos, all of this war paint, all of this armor here, all of this muscle. I build it all to protect myself against a violent world. And with that powerful imagination, that's literally what I create every single day of my life. In the Dhammapada, the Buddhist Bible, it says that what we create today is as a result of what we thought yesterday, and what we experience tomorrow will be as a result of what we thought today. So our thoughts and our imagination are very powerful, and I created all those things with that aggression. That's why I say to people, why are you aggressive? Why are you angry? You know, you're not going to solve the world with that. You know, this is something. There's a great Buddhist teacher. His name will come to me in a minute. He's a Vietnamese guy. Forgive me for forgetting his name. And one of his followers was very aggressively anti-war, very aggressively anti-violence, very aggressively anti-aggression. And he used to be very vitriolic when he was talking, and he was trying to spread the word of peace, and he was very angry about the violence in the world. And this teacher said to him, look, you're not serving me, and you're not serving yourself when you try and get rid of black by adding black. He said, you're not going to get rid of violence by adding violence to it. You're not going to get rid of aggression by adding aggression to it. You're not going to get rid of anger and jealousy by adding the same thing. You know, if you want to get rid of all of these things, you need to work at a higher level. You need to come from a level of love. And that, when you say that, I know it sounds wank, but actually it's the most powerful thing you can do. Finding that frequency, maintaining that frequency takes a massive internal muscle. It takes very, very strong faith, and it takes a really elevated consciousness to be able to get there. And to elevate your consciousness, you have to pretty much kill everything below it. You have to dissolve all that aggression, you have to dissolve all that fear, you have to let go of so many things. You have to, as they say, destroy an old reality to create a new reality. That's what makes me laugh when people scoff at self-help. They scoff at it because they're afraid of it, or they're ignorant of it, maybe a bit of both, because it's the most difficult thing you'll ever do. Even the great prophets like Muhammad and Arjuna and Christ and you know, people like Lao Tzu, they all struggled with it. They all kind of buckled before it and had to really grow their courage. The Bibles are basically self-help books. They just proffer techniques in helping you to helping you with your personal development. So it's a very difficult task. So the idea is that you know, these two guys in a club, there's nobody else there, but they still find somebody to fight with. In my early days, when I had so much aggression, I was fighting with myself. I abused myself physically and sexually. I punched walls, you know, I smashed houses up in temper. You know, I punched my own body. Sometimes I stabbed myself. You know, I remember putting a pin on my hand and whacking it through my hand with a hammer, because it was just had so much aggression. So we don't need to worry about what's out there. We need to just concentrate what's in us. Swedenborg calls it the law of correspondence. If we get a pilot light, if we look at somebody and think, oh, they're greedy, they're angry, they're violent, look at how they're selling out, look at how contradictory they are, look at how hypocritical they are. When we get that pilot light of aggression, when we watch somebody or we observe somebody and we get that pilot light of response, it's because it's in us. It's in us. We don't have to worry about them. We should write to them, we should send them a check and say, thank you, you're my teacher. You've shown me something about myself that I hadn't recognized. The violence is in me. The hypocrisy is in me, the aggression is in me, the jealousy is in me, the envy is in me, the judgment is in me. I just need to work on me. It's fantastic, it's amazing. Otherwise, everywhere you go, you're going to be finding somebody that's opposite to you. You know, if I go as a Christian, I'm going to be bumping into people who I think are my enemy. If I go as a Muslim, I'm going to find people that think that I'm their enemy. If I go as a Jain, if I go as a Hindu, if I go as an atheist, I'm going to find people that have opposing views, and I'm going to find enemies in the world, and I don't feel enemies in the world. You know, if I go as a human being, I'm going to find other human beings. Somebody said to me, somebody once accused me of kind of dipping in and out of different faiths, and he was particularly angry about the fact that I'd quoted Muhammad, and he said, Muhammad is my enemy, he's my enemy, he's our enemy, he's blowing our people up. And I just said, listen, you know, or am I missing something, he said. And this is a really nice guy that I was speaking to. He was a really lovely guy, but he was very angry about something I'd said. And I said, look, you know, I said, I live in a street. If I look out my window now, I said, I've got neighbours who are Muslim, I've got neighbours who are Sikh, I've got neighbours who are Hindu, I've got neighbours who are atheist. I said, there's probably some Jains out there, you know, there are some Buddhists, definitely. I said, none of them are my enemies. They're just my neighbours, they're friends, they're beautiful people, they're teachers. You know, I have teachers I have Muslim teachers, I have Hindu teachers, I have Sikh teachers, I have Christian teachers, I have teachers. I've got a friend that writes to me from across the pond who is an atheist. I learn from him. There's my friend called Larry. I learn from Larry. You know, he doesn't follow any of the particular faiths, but I still learn from him because I don't really care about labels. I'm just interested in learning. I'm interested in exploring. I'm interested in corroborating what I've actually experienced. But they're not my enemies. And if I start feeling that pile of anger, that pile of aggression, I don't need to look at the object of my aggression. I need to look at why I'm aggressive, why that's corresponding in me. Then that object of aggression becomes my teacher, or that person of aggression, or that, you know, if you look at someone on the internet or on the telly and you just think they're selling out or whatever it is, you know, people have got an opinion on everything, I guess, but if we look at it, they are teachers. If it's corresponding in us, when we can sit above that and observe it, then we can really start to learn. We can really start to get some stuff. So to me, it's about recognizing that it's in you. It is in you. It's not out there, it's in you. So work on you. Work on converting that. Work on containing it, observing it, breaking it down. See, if you've got a big lump of aggression and it keeps going pilot light, work on it, observe it, break it down into its component parts and reform it into something beautiful, reform it into something great. But don't blame the world for your aggression. Don't blame the world for your anger. Don't blame the world for your lack of money, or don't blame the world for your lack of opportunity. The money's out there. The opportunity's out there. You just have to go and look. It's all there. And if you don't grab hold of that negative, that shadow is going to be working away in the background, creating a shit reality for you every single day. If you don't arrest that part of you, if you don't recognize that part of you, if you don't watch it as it rises up. Because what these things do is we get a pilot of aggression or a pilot of response, and it rises up, and if we engage it mentally, we go from observing aggression to becoming aggressive. So there's a point of exchange where we actually go into the gear of the emotion. So I feel anger, I feel jealousy, I feel greed, I feel impatient. It rises up. If I observe it, I'm able to see it as separate. It's an emotion, and I can calm it and dissolve it. Like a top dog, I'll bring it back into alignment, and I can convert it into something else. If I don't observe it, it will just come up, and then it will take over my consciousness, and suddenly it's no longer me feeling aggression, it's me being aggressive, and me believing in the aggression, and me believing in the need for aggression. So it's really about recognizing these things as separate and containing them and controlling them. When you've got this big lump of aggression, you're sitting on a fortune. I'm going to talk about that in one of the other talks about alchemy, but we're sitting on this fortune of aggression. But the main thing is this, because we can convert that into gold, but the main thing is to remember it's in you. It is in you. You don't need to work on anybody else, just work on you. You will not convert your wife. You'll not convert your friends, just work on you. If you work on you and you get yourself right, all those other things will fall into line. Everything else will be really good. So, there's this great story that will finish this off really nice about a vicar that's going to do a sermon. But every time he sits to write the sermon, His son interrupts him, he wants to play. So the guy thinks to himself, I know what I'll do, I'll keep him busy. He gets a magazine, tears a page out, because on the page of this magazine is like a map of the whole world. So he tears this map of the whole world up into lots of tiny little pieces, and he gives it to his son. He says, that's a jigsaw. He said, it's the world, I want you to put the world together. He said, and once you put the world together, he said, we can play. The vicar's thinking to himself, this will take him a long time to get this right, gives me a chance to do my work. 5 minutes later, the kid comes up and he's got the world right, it's all put in order. And the vicar says to him, how did you manage to get that done so quick? He said, oh, it was easy. He said, on the other side of the page, there was a picture of a man. He said, I just put the man together. When the man was right, the world was right. That's just a great thing to remember, that we just need to get ourselves right. We need to work on ourselves. When we get ourselves right, the world will be perfectly fine.